राधा कृष्ण को गोपना शाम खंड राधा खंड वृंदावन धाम की जय, नवदीप धाम की जय, गंगा माई की जय, जमुना माई की जय, द्वारका धाम की जय, स्वामी तो भक्तवृंद की जय। All glory to the all glory to the Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Gurudev, all glories to some Vaishnava devotees, and all glories to you, Mother Rukmini Devi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Sahadev Prabhu. Good to see you.
Oh, Mother. You're like a raindrop on Sahara Desert.
Oh, you are very kind. You are like a reservoir doing Bhagavatam class every day. So thank you for being a reservoir for all the devotees.
Oh, Hare Krishna, we miss you so much, and we're very fortunate to have you today. So, dear devotees, today we are very, very much blessed. We have our own Her Grace Mother Rukmini Devi, who needs no introduction on this platform. She's been most of us, I believe, she is our auntie. She's been so generous, so nice, so kind, sharing her love and knowledge with us every now and then. And we're very fortunate to have you back, Mother.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome back to your own home, Hare Krishna, Africa. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you for inviting.
So we may put the verse on the screen and then you take it over.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
I will chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistuki. Reading from SRIMAD Bhagavatam Canto 2, Chapter 4, which is called The Process of Creation. We're reading from text number 5. Raja Uvacha Samichinam Vacho Brahman Sarvagyasya Tavanaga Tamo Visiryate Mayam Harer Katayata Katam. I'll chant it 2 more times. Raja Uvacha Samichinam Vacho Brahman Sarvagyasya Tavanaga Tamo Visiryate Mayam Harer Katayata Katam. Raja Uvacha Samichinam Vacho Brahman Sarvagyasya Tavanaga Tamo Visiryate Mayam Harer Katayata Katam. Word for word translation. Raja Uvacha, the king said, Samichinam, perfectly right, Vachaha, speeches, Brahman, O learned Brahmana, Sarvagyasya, one who knows all, tava, your, anaga, without any contamination, tamaha, the darkness of ignorance, visiryate, gradually disappearing, mayam, unto me, HARE, of the Lord, kata yataha, as you are speaking, katam, topics. Translation, Maharaj Parikshit said, "O learned Brahmana, you know everything." He's speaking to Sukadev Goswami, of course, right? "You know everything because you are without material contamination. Therefore, whatever you have spoken to me appears perfectly right. Your speeches are gradually destroying the darkness of my ignorance, for you are narrating the topics of the Lord." Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The practical experience of Maharaj Parikshit is disclosed herein, revealing that transcendental topics of the Lord act like injections when received by the sincere devotee from a person who is perfectly uncontaminated by material tinges. In other words, reception of the messages of SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM from professional men heard by a karma khandya audience never acts miraculously, as stated here. Devotional hearing of the messages of the Lord is not like hearing ordinary topics. Therefore, the action will be felt by the sincere hearer by experience of the gradual disappearance of ignorance. Yasya deve para bhaktir yata deve tata guru tasya te katita hirta prakashante mahatmanaha. Svetasvatara Upanishad 6:23. When a hungry man is given food to eat, he feels satiation of hunger and the pleasure of dining simultaneously. Thus, he does not have to ask whether he has been fed or not. The crucial test of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is that one should get positive enlightenment by such an act. Let me chant some prayers of Mangala Charana, prayers for blessings. Oh, let me see, get this. Ajnanatimarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksum Nilatam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanjakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhu Vaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Thank you all so much for joining. And I wanted to say in the beginning that usually whenever I've spoken on this platform, the men, the Vaishnavas, have so many introspective questions, but I feel sad because I never hear from the ladies, and I know you're out there. So I wanted to invite you also, please listen carefully. If it's a good idea to help you, have a pen or pencil, take some notes, because I'd love for you to, at the end of the class, reflect what was important for you, or if you have any questions. So yeah, I want to really invite the ladies to speak up as much as their brothers. Thank you so much. So I wanted to note down, first of all, I think this is a wonderful purport, and I wanted to just discuss some highlights that jumped out for me from Srila Prabhupada's purport here. First of all, he says that the topics of the Lord are like injections when received with an open and sincere heart. So I know, we've just been through COVID all over the world, and different people have different opinions about the COVID vaccine. But this is a vaccine that we don't have to argue about, or we don't have to disagree about, because this is a vaccine, hearing the topics of the Lord, this is a vaccine that if we hear with a sincere and open heart, Srila Prabhupada says, this vaccine can cure the disease of ignorance. And isn't that what we're looking for in hearing and attending SRIMAD Bhagavatam class? So I think that's a very, very important point. Yeah. And he also says, so it works when we're hearing with a sincere and open heart. But when does it not work? And this is really interesting. Sometimes this vaccine doesn't work. And how is that? So he says when there's the audience, so it's a reciprocation, right, between the speaker and the hearer. So he's saying when the audience is a karma kandya audience, this vaccine never acts miraculously. So what is a karma kandya audience? It's an audience that's not interested in hearing to learn how to love Krishna or how to make spiritual advancement, but hearing only as kind of a cultural thing, hearing to get some good pious results. Like sometimes in India, they have these big cultural events. They're very pious, but they have an event to hear Srimad Bhagavatam for 7 days. But as Srila Prabhupada often says, they love to jump to the 10th canto, to the pastimes of Krishna with his beloved gopis, but they don't like to hear about from the second canto we're doing right now, or about how the universes are created, the different incarnations, Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, Ajamil. They don't like to hear that stuff. They just like to jump to Krishna's pastimes with the gopis. Why? Because they have lust in their own hearts, right? So I wanted to share something with you that's, I think, very, very powerful from Srila Prabhupada. This is an excerpt from a talk he gave in Vrindavan in 1972. And he's criticizing these kind of preachers, these professional men, as he often calls them, or even in this purport, he called them professional men. I think he's also criticizing his own disciples as well. So listen closely here. This shraddha has to be increased. Then when you come to the point of Vasudeva Kata Ruchi, that means a taste for hearing Krishna's messages, that is the beginning of our perfection. And then he says, at the present moment, there is no ruchi, no taste. There are so many exalted persons, but they have no taste. They have lost all taste. The preachers could not preach properly to create taste in the people in general. Then he says, it's not the fault of the people. It's the fault of the so-called preacher, because they could not create taste. They wanted to take the place of Krishna. Strong words, huh? They couldn't create taste in their audience, so they want to take the place of Krishna. That was their purpose. Imitation of Krishna, like jumping to the pastimes with the gopis, right? Imitation is bad. That will not do. You have to create taste, just like Sri Chaitanya did. So isn't that an interesting something from Srila Prabhupada? So yeah, another point I want to bring out here. So this phrase that he uses in the purport, karma kandya audience. So I want to say something also about our misuse of the word karmi in ISKCON. We hear that all the time, right? But karmi is not a word to be weaponized against people who aren't interested in Krishna consciousness, or someone who hasn't taken to Krishna consciousness. It shouldn't be used to create an insider-outsider mentality, an us and them kind of mentality, which we so often hear, right? Oh, he's just a karmi. What does he know, right? It's a pejorative. It sounds terrible. It's mean, it's unkind. And even though no one knows what it means, it just sounds mean. It's hurtful, and it hurts people's hearts. And we should never use that word about anyone. So I want to share a couple of stories to illustrate my point here. The first one is a very sweet story from Srila Prabhupada. When the devotees went to London in 1968, they first went. In 1969, they made their first devotee, who was Kulashekar Prabhu, a British young man. And in 1969, he brought his father to meet Srila Prabhupada, and they had a nice chat. And then years later, Kulashekar Prabhu was living in New Vrindavan. It must have been maybe 1975 or 76, several years later, eight or 9 years later. And Kulashekar was living in New Vrindavan, and Srila Prabhupada remembered his father. Can you believe it? So many years later, just brief encounter. And Srila Prabhupada asked Kulashekar Prabhu, "How is your father?" He asked him. And Kulashekar Prabhu said, "Oh, Prabhupada, my father's just a karmi, wasting his life like an ass, working like an ass." And Prabhupada said, "You should never speak like that about your father." He said, "You should always be respectful to your father. Your father is my friend." Isn't that a beautiful story? So therefore, let's completely, in Africa, US, Europe, Asia, India, let's just eliminate this karmi word, because it's a misunderstanding and it just hurts people's hearts, right? And it hurts our hearts when we use it. So I want to share another story that I think is very indicative. When my son was about 5, he was in a Gurukula, and I'm not going to say where, but the little boys were swimming at a swimming hole at this Gurukula. And this property where they were swimming was not owned by the temple Gurukula. It was owned by the neighbors next door. And they were kind enough to let the devotee kids swim at their swimming place. And so one day our boys were all swimming, and the neighbors who owned the property were also, those kids were also swimming there. And one of the little boys, who was my son's age, about 5, said, because he'd heard this from his parents, right? He heard this from the older devotees. He said, "I don't want to swim here with karmis. Let's go swim somewhere else. These are karmis. I don't want to swim with them." So how painful, how hurtful, right? And these are the people that let our kids swim on their property. So I just want to say, it reverberates. It goes down the generations. Our kids repeat it. We repeat it. People don't even know what it means or what we're talking about. So my humble request to all of Africa, all of America, all of everywhere, let's just eliminate this word from our Krishna conscious vocabulary, okay? So back to the purport. Srila Prabhupada, he says, the sincere hearer will experience a gradual disappearance of ignorance. So yeah, it's a reciprocation between the speaker and the hearer. Like, I know I love to come and speak on this Africa platform and join all of you, because I know that all of you are so sincere and you're so eager to hear, and it's such a joy. And I remember that Prabhupada came to Africa 5 times because he loved the devotees in Africa. So it's a reciprocation. And Prabhupada also gives an example. He says, when a man is potent and a woman is fertile, there will be a pregnancy. So yeah, so this is like trying to get encourage Krishna to take birth in our own hearts, right? Yeah, by deep hearing, sincere hearing. And again, at the end of the purport, he says, the crucial test of hearing SRIMAD Bhagavatam is what? It's when we get positive enlightenment, like Krishna taking birth in our hearts, lighting up our hearts from in our hearts, right? So we're supposed, in Krishna consciousness, if we're serious, if we're taking it seriously, we're supposed to test ourselves. Am I getting fed? Am I starting to experience a cessation of material hunger? Am I starting to take pleasure in hearing, serving, having a taste for chanting the holy name? So it's interesting here that Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse, Yasya Devi Parabhaktir, very important verse. And we usually hear it in reference to a conversation about faith, right? Yasya Devi Parabhaktir. And the translation, he doesn't actually give the translation of this verse in the purport, but here's the translation of this verse. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. So here in this purport, the translation is not given, but the verse is used in a different context. So Srila Prabhupada here is speaking about a sincere hearer, which is what we aspire to be, right? Gaining actual taste, actual experience of Krishna, the disappearance of ignorance, and getting a taste for Krishna consciousness. So initial faith would mean giving respect to a pure devotee. If someone has an interest to come and hear, sit down and listen. But it means more than that. What's Srila Prabhupada talking about here in this purport? It means hearing with a deep emotional connection. Ruchi or taste is an essential component of a real open-hearted faith. So it's not just a beginning little, oh, I think I'll sit down and listen to this guy. It indicates a deeper, like a little taste, right? That's a component of faith. So it's not a superficial or just an initial pang of respect. It's wholehearted, and it's not a self-deception. So yeah, if we want to hear with an open-hearted faith, we have to really, in an authentic way, open our hearts. So my question is then, are we rational beings or are we emotional beings? I mean, ultimately, we know we're spiritual beings, right? But I was thinking back how Aristotle, the great Catholic theologian, said that man is the rational animal. But I would say, no, we're more than that, right? Because animals also use ration. The cat jumps up on the counter to drink the milk, and the dog barks to defend his or her turf, right? So as human beings, if we only use rational intelligence, Srila Prabhupada so often talks about this, right? He says, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Does that make us human? Does that make us better than the animals? No. Actually, we're more than rational beings. As humans and parts and parcels of Krishna, meant to go back to Krishna, we're meant to open up the deep emotional intelligence of our hearts and offer that deep emotional, open-hearted, wholehearted intelligence to Krishna. So the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, when we hear them, they're not meant to just remain in our headspace, right? They're meant to sink down deeply into our heart and actually where we can actually taste Krishna consciousness with the emotional intelligence of our heart. So I want to say that sometimes men in Krishna consciousness, I hope all you men won't get offended. Sometimes men in Krishna consciousness think, oh, emotions are only for the crybaby women, right? Emotions are only for those crybaby women, right? But the fact is, an awakened bhakta on an authentic spiritual path is crying for Krishna. Have you ever heard that this bhakti path is a crying school? I don't know if I've mentioned that on this platform before. Maybe I have. But here's something from Srila Prabhupada's Guru Maharaj, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. I want to read this to you. Here he says, now you think of him as being so strict, right? Sitting up so straight and so strict and intense. But here's what he says about crying. Crying here doesn't literally mean shedding tears, but crying from the heart. The heart will cry only when it will feel intense separation from Krishna. That intense separation will be felt only when it feels helplessness and shelterless in this material world. And such helplessness and shelterlessness is the outcome of sufferings and pangs of this world. Thus, sufferings in this world are the real friends. Can you believe it? Sufferings are the real friends of the living entity because they actually help our heart cry for Krishna. Wow. What an amazing quote, right? In my opinion. So, yeah, I was thinking there's a quote from the Native American people, the indigenous people of the US, and they say something very wise. The longest journey you will ever take in your life is from your head to your heart, right? So they knew that people tend to stay in the headspace. So, yeah, so how do we get there, right? How do we embark on that journey from the head to the heart? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in Sri Harinam Chintamani, he says, he's speaking about a sincere devotee here. He says, he will always be praying to the Lord that he will chant clear, attentive rounds with his mind fixed on Krishna. For on one's own, one cannot accomplish anything. This is a really essential point. Krishna's grace is necessary to cross the ocean of material existence. You see, it's not just about doing our sadhana. Being anxious in heart, one should beg for mercy, and because Krishna is merciful, he will help. Whoever does not try for that mercy is very unfortunate. So he's instructing that we should be in anxiety to get Krishna's mercy, right? To cry to Krishna. So how do we become Krishna conscious, actually? Once Prabhupada was asked that by the great Vishnu Jan Swami, he said, how can we render perfect service to Krishna? And Prabhupada just shot back without a moment hesitation. Prabhupada said, by your anxiety to get Krishna consciousness, that's how you can begin to approach real Krishna consciousness. So I want to share another sweet story here. This is a story about Srila Prabhupada. He was asked by one of my god sisters, how can we get rid of anxiety? And Prabhupada said, you must have anxiety. If you don't have anxiety for Krishna, you will have anxiety for Maya. So you must have some anxiety. Take on some anxiety to attain the lotus feet of Krishna, to cry for Krishna's grace. And then Prabhupada said something really funny. He said, otherwise, if you don't have anxiety, you will just be a Jambi. And everyone went, what? Jambi? What's a Jambi? And it was Prabhupada's Bengali pronunciation of the word zombie. So Prabhupada was saying, if we don't have some anxiety to attain Krishna's lotus feet, to love Krishna, to cry for Krishna, we'll just be zombies. So do you want to be a zombie? Sahadev Prabhu? No. Andrea Prabhu? No. So I don't either. I don't want to be a zombie. And if you look at Srila Prabhupada's Back to Godhead magazine, on the masthead of the magazine, Prabhupada has Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andakar. That Krishna is like the sun, Maya is like the darkness. Go to Krishna and get up above the clouds of this Maya darkness. And there's another verse that we hear often, like sometimes when you go to a Hindu event, you might hear this verse chanted, but Prabhupada also chants this verse. This is another one about coming above ignorance. Being sincere, right, to overcome ignorance. Asato mam sadgamaya, tamaso mam jyotir gamaya, mritu ma amritam gamaya, om shanti, shanti, shanti. So this verse says, my dear Lord, please don't keep me in the unreality of ignorance, but let me go to the reality of the Sat, the eternal, right? Don't keep me in darkness, some tamas, right? But let me go toward the light of spiritual knowledge, jyoti, right? Keep me not in the world of mortality, mrityu, but make me go to the world of immortality, of self-realization, God realization, and then shanti, shanti, shanti. This is the peace that we're seeking. And so many places in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about this pure unalloyed bhakti, and in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anya Vilasita Sunyam. Our hearts have to be free from these impediments, these conditioning impediments. And I wanted to make the point here that bhakti is meant to give us a direct experience, that we're not meant to only be hearing about it from the experience of others. So it's really, really important to chant the holy name, to attend SRIMAD Bhagavatam class, and to do all the other practices we have. Although that's only the beginning, because, you know, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, 2nd verse, Raja Vidyaraja Guyam, Pavitramidamuttamam, Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam, Susukam Kartam Avyayam. So this verse says that it's meant to be pratyaksha. It's meant to be experienced directly. So in the purport to that verse, Srila Prabhupada says that this can actually be perceived, that experiencing Krishna directly, not just hearing about someone else's experience of Krishna, can actually be perceived when, right? When we chant without offense, we can feel transcendental pleasure and quickly become purified of material contaminations. So my question for me and my question for all of you is, what's stopping us? What's blocking us? So if chanting is our main practice, that we, as devotees, we devote a significant amount of time every day to this practice, right? So should we just be wasting that time with inattention? So the root cause of all the offenses in chanting the holy name is this inattention, which is called in Sanskrit pramada, inattention. It means like a type of insanity or a type of madness or craziness. And it's described as having 3 types. So the first one, all of you scholars out there who like to hear the Sanskrit, the first one is called jadya, which means dullness. I'm chanting, but I'm just really half asleep. Right? Just being dull, half asleep. And then the second one is distraction, right? As soon as I know this happens to me, as soon as I sit down to chant japa, immediately I think of jumping up at all the things I have to do on my to-do list. Oh, you're supposed to call so-and-so. You're supposed to call your sister. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do that. As soon as you sit down to chant japa, and you have to say to that monkey mind, we'll talk about this later. Right now, we're going to sit down and chant the holy name, right? Okay. So that distraction is called vikshepa. That's the Sanskrit word for distraction. Then the third one is udasinasya. And that's an interesting one, because maybe we're not sleepy and maybe we're not even distracted at the moment, but it's just kind of like an indifference. I'm just not into it. And it's due to a lack of faith or a lack of desire for Krishna, right? So those are the 3, jadya, vikshepa, and udasinasya. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that attraction will happen if we just try to chant carefully. And the trouble is, the holy name is just not very happy with us when we're chanting so carelessly. And so we're not really able to access his blessings, right? Krishna is amazing. His holy name, his form, his qualities are all amazing, his pastimes. And so we can pray to be amazed by this wonderful Krishna and not be so dull, asleep, or distracted, right? So thank you all so much. And I want to ask any of you to reflect back. I think there are 20 of us here right now. Let's see, Narayani Devi Dasi is here. Andrea is here. Yasoda Devi is here. I think those are the only, Gail is here. Mitravinda is here. Yay. Okay. Can I invite, first of all, one of you Vaishnavis to reflect something back, and then we can take turns. I know the men in Africa are extremely introspective, but let's invite one of the ladies and then we can take turns. Do you have a reflection or do you have a question? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother Savitri. I'm sorry, Mother Rukmini. I just finished
Oh,
talking.
Gail, nice to see your sweet face. Nice to see Lord Gaurachandra. Haribol.
Haribo. Yeah, I mean, I resonated so much with that line when you said that it's such a long journey from the head to the heart. That's been my Krishna conscious lifelong endeavor, to figure out how to get what I know in my head to come into my heart. So I was just really resonated with that.
Thank you so much. Such an important reflection. And isn't it beautiful that that doesn't even come from someone in our tradition? It comes from a Native American tradition. So we can be so eager to receive knowledge from all directions, right? There's something in the chat here. In every devotee's life, there's been a time we were all so attentive in our chanting. At what time did we lose focus? And what was the cause? Kushadas. Okay, so this is the next question from the wise and deep Kushadas. At what time did we lose focus and what was the cause? You know, this is an interesting question because very often devotees will say that we get special mercy when we first become devotees and everything's magical and everything's everyone's nice and sweet and the prasadam is great and we love halava and we just make so much advancement. But, you know, I think part of it is that, I see suddenness here as well. Thank you for joining, M. Vishaka Dasi. I think more than that Krishna giving special mercy, I think it's that we start to take it for granted and we start to think that we're doing it on our own. And we stop thinking that I will get this Krishna consciousness by the mercy of Krishna. We're thinking, if I chant, if I do everything, if I check all the boxes, I will get Krishna. It's not by our sadhana. Our sadhana is a cry to Krishna for his mercy, and only by his mercy will we be able to achieve him. So I think we have to stay in that attuned consciousness. And when we see ourselves fading out, as we do practice, I'll speak for myself every day, then we have to give ourselves a little slap. You know, wake up, wake up. Krishna is wonderful. How can you forget? And cry to Krishna to help us remember him. So I hope that's a helpful answer. I see that Varaha Acharya has a hand raised, but I want to reach out to a woman. Let's go back and forth between something from a Vaishnavi and something from a Vaishnava. So among all you wonderful Vaishnavis who are present, would anyone like to give a reflection or?
Andrea has a hand up. So we
Andrea, okay, Andrea Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, dear Rukmini Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisance. Of course, to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much also to the Hare Krishna Africa folks for hosting these classes. Always, always interesting to see the questions that come up. Thank you for prompting us Vaishnavis to speak up, because you're right. Sometimes I forget and I don't, I kind of just wait until the guys have gone, and then I forget that it's important for me to speak up as well for my own betterment in terms of asking questions and things of that sort. So thank you so much for sharing that. What was really meaningful for me of your class to reflect was the call to action of not using the term karmis was really powerful for me in this class, especially with the examples and the anecdotes that you shared of the stories of how it really impacted our relationship to others when people use that term. I know that when I first came to Krishna consciousness, I was attending Bhagavad Gita classes at 26 2nd Avenue, and there was a lot of very kind of orthodox or old school speakers that would speak there, and a lot of times they would use that term karmis. And I was so new to it that I didn't understand what it meant, but I could tell that it was like a really negative term. And you're right, it just impacted my heart in its own way. I was just like, oh, I don't want to be a karmi, but I also really felt kind of like my heart hurt when I heard it used to others, and I wasn't sure how welcoming it was. So I really, really appreciate you kind of sharing that call to action and encouraging everyone to not use that term, because I agree, if we want to be a welcoming society and we want to I've heard you say before, we want to show others how Krishna loves them, about how we treat them, then using pejorative terms like that are not really going to be helpful. So thank you so much for that call to action. I don't know that if I've used it, but I will definitely encourage the conversation with others in terms of not using it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for that very important reflection. And just for you reflected from your own experience. You had no idea what it meant, but you felt it as hurtful. And the person was not using it in an appropriate way anyway, right? So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And so I saw that, let's see, Faraha Acharya had a question.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, my obeisance.
My humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
All glories to Srila
All
Prabhupada.
glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to the assembly. My question is also a follow-up on the last question. Well, thank you for reminding us not to be derogative in our way of addressing those who are not practicing Krishna consciousness. In fact, I just used that word today, so it made me feel somehow. But two things I want to say. One is that it's like telling Muslims not to use the word kafir, right? So if we don't use the word karni, of course, any type of derogative remarks is very hurting, or any form of segregation is always hurting, especially when you're on the receiving side. There's no doubt about it. But I think it's nice telling us not to be mindful, not to use that word. But then you didn't tell us what word we should use instead. I think that is also necessary, so that we know what to replace it with.
Okay.
So that's my question. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I would say if you're in a group of Muslims and they use the word kafir, is that what it is? Or say you're in a group of Christians and they talk about heathens, right? Or say you're in a group of Hindus and they talk about yavanas and mlechas. It hurts our hearts, right? So our vision, according to what we've received from Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya, who danced with the dead body of the so-called untouchable Haridas Thakur, right? That was unheard of. So here's Lord Chaitanya dancing with the body of a so-called untouchable. You're asking what word should we use? We just, first of all, have to have the vision that everyone, no matter what race or gender or species even, they're just as dear to Krishna as I am. So maybe we just think that they're all Krishna's beloved devotees. They haven't realized it yet. And maybe they go with another name, maybe they bow down 5 times a day, or maybe they don't, you know what I mean? But they're just people who are in different places of progress. This is the vision of Krishna. This is the vision of the great devotees. We have to make our vision like theirs. Like, the Christians have a saying, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. So if we want to make our vision like Krishna's vision, we have to see that. What should we call them? We should call them, Prabhu, we should call them my dear respected friend, my dear friend, Here the story I told, Srila Prabhupada says to this brahmachari, your father is my friend, right? So he's thinking his father is a karmi working like an ass. And the great Srila Prabhupada is saying, your father is my friend. You should always be respectful. So can we see all, like Prabhupada says in one of his purports in Bhagavad Gita, that a pure devotee sees all living beings just like a kindly father sees his children. So can we see all living beings like our own friends, like our children? Not that we want to be domineering to them or, but as our friend, my dear friend. How about friend? I like the word friend better than the word karmi. Is that helpful?
No, not helpful at all. Let me come in. The word friend cannot replace non-devotee. It is not in every context that you can use the word friend. And I can, of course, what Prabhupada said and the explanation you've just given is correct. sadhus should see every living entity as friend, right? But I can also understand Prabhupada saying that the father of his devotees is his friend, in the sense that the devotee is like a son to him, and his father should be seen as a friend of his guru. Well, so anyway, that's how I understand it. But it could also go further, the way you said. That is also correct. Now, I have another question. Why it cannot? Why?
Wait, can I just respond to what you just said, please? Would that be
No,
all
no,
right?
no. I won't finish. It's just the same thing. It's not another question.
Okay.
So, like the scripture says, that brahmanas should not work under anybody. The brahmanas, because they are supposed to uphold the truth, and if you serve somebody, you cannot always tell the truth. If you are serving somebody, you have to say what will please the person. So a brahmana, the scripture says this: a brahmana should not work for somebody. And if brahmana cannot maintain himself just by preaching and doing devotional work, the worst it can descend to is to become a vaishya, but not working as a shudra. So, I mean, these are our scriptural injunctions. So what do you say about that?
Okay, here's what I would say. First of all, I would say, if you or others don't feel that it's possible for you to think of other people in the world as your friends, then maybe you could say non-devotee.
Thank you.
But I still think friend is better and karmi is really worse. Now, regarding your second question about how a Brahmin should not work for anyone, that's an ideal that's there in ancient times. These days, that may not be possible for everyone. And I'll give you an example. I know someone who he's from India, from a Brahmin family, and he got a job. He had to maintain his family somehow, right? So he got a job working at a big, I don't know, in Africa, if you have, what's this called? Walmart. It's like a big store that sells everything, right? So he got a job at something like a Walmart, a big store, and he was the new guy. And so they told him, okay, your job is to clean the bathrooms. And he said, oh, no, I'm a Brahmin. I cannot clean the bathrooms. So he wasn't able to keep that job because he was holding on to his Brahminical pride from birth. But still, he has to maintain his family. So those people who are thinking in a way that, no, I'm a Brahmin, I can't serve anyone, they may not be able to exist at this current time in our Kali Yuga. They may have to get a job working for Microsoft or Walmart or Google or somebody. They may have to do that in order to maintain their families. So those ideals that you're talking about may not work. Just like in the SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM, it says that brahmacharis should wear tree bark, right? It says that in SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM, but is that possible in this day and age? I don't think so. So we have to see what works for us today and what we can actually apply in our lives. Thank you so much. What else? Is there a question from one of the Vaishnavis?
Yes, I think we have Narayani's hand up.
Okay, great. Thank you all for speaking up, all you wonderful Vaishnavis.
It's by your encouragement and inciting the Matajis to speak today. Beautiful.
Narayan.
Hare Krishna, Mother Rukmini.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for the class and everything.
Thank you for speaking.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. The question is, I'm trying to say something about the chanting of the holy name. Sometimes when we're chanting the holy name, we get so distracted and the mind is keep roaming about. But what I do personally, I always put bhajan on, and then sometimes the bhajan have Krishna pictures and stuff, and then I'll be chanting at the same time. So, and then sometimes too, you see Krishna face, and then you'll be focusing on the face, and then it really works. Your chanting goes more smoothly, and for some kind of reason, you finish really fast. So this is what I wanted to say.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Well, just like you have, who are the beautiful deities that are there behind you in that picture?
It's Krishna and Radha.
Krishna and Radha from somewhere. Well, they're very beautiful. And I think you're right, you know, because just like silent meditation that people do is very, very hard for us in Kali Yuga. So when we're chanting the holy name out loud, we're using our ears, we're using our tongue. And then if we can look at a beautiful picture of Krishna, we're using our eyes. If we can light some incense, then we're using the sense of smell. And then we're touching the beads, we're using the sense of touch. So it's like a super stereo surround sound experience. So the more we can engage our senses, it's wonderful, because bhakti is an engagement of the senses in the service of the master of the senses, Lord Hrishikesh. So thank you. That's a beautiful reflection.
And then I have another thing to say. Sometimes when you're doing that, and even your mind is going off, your mind goes off on Krishna.
True. Like it'll be going Hare Krishna, and then think, Krishna's so naughty in Vrindavan when he steals the butter, right? You're right. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we will allow one of the introspective Vaishnavas to have a reflection or a question. Thank you for the beautiful darshan also.
Well, I say Hari Chakra Prabhu, and but if I may come in to say something really quick, Mother Rukmini.
Okay.
And, that is, of course, like always, we're very appreciative and thankful for your presence and your wisdom that you share with us all the time. In regards to a comment that His Grace Shriman Varaha Prabhu made about Brahmins not working for Sudras, and you perfectly and wonderfully answered. But what I also wanted to add to what you just said is that, yes, these varnas and ashrams are there, but the very Supreme Lord who taught us devotional service said of himself, even though he was a sannyasi, but he said he was not a sannyasi, he was not brahmachari, he was not grihasta, he is not the Brahmin, he is not Sudra. So Vaishnavas are above all these varnas and ashrams. So my understanding is that as Vaishnavas, when there is the need for us to act as Brahmins, we act as such. When there is the need for us to work as Sudras, we work as such. So that is my understanding.
Thank you.
Because as Vaishnavas, all we do is just to serve and please the Lord. So if even pleasing the Lord appears to be like a Sudra work, we're still happy doing it. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, that was beautiful. And you reminded me of a beautiful story. Of course, Lord Chaitanya, what you're referring to, Lord Chaitanya said, I am the servant of the servant of the servant of the maintainer of the gopis, right? But you reminded me of a beautiful story. So once in Mayapur in the early days, when there wasn't much there, the sewage system backed up. And all the fields were full of you-know-what from the sewers, from the toilets. And the Gurukula boys, I don't know who asked them to do this, but teacher asked the Gurukula boys to go in the field. So they had their dhotis hiked up, like tied up high, and they're wading through this actual muck in the fields, trying to unstick the stuckness in the sewage. Prabhupada was looking down from his balcony, his apartment there is one floor up. He is looking down and he said, listen to this. This is exactly on point. You just reminded me of this story. Prabhupada said, this is Vaishnava. He is willing to do any service for Krishna. This is what it means to be a Vaishnava. So, yeah, that means do the needful, right? Do what needs to be done for the pleasure of Krishna. Pick up a broom if it's necessary, give a class if it's necessary, worship the deities when it's necessary. Thank you so much, Sahadev. You reminded me of a beautiful story. Is there a Vaishnavi now that has a question?
I have a question in the chat room.
Okay, you are a Vaishnava. We're looking for Vaishnavis.
Before we catch him, let's see if there's one Vaishnavi that has a reflection or a question.
Yeah.
Well, just to support what you just finished saying, Mother Rukmini, your godbrother, Prajumna Prabhu, Damodar Swami often quotes Prajumna Prabhu as for his definition of what it means to be a Vaishnav, which is to simply be available.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Be available. Krishna.
Just to simply be available for Krishna's service, whatever that may be.
I love
just
that.
Be available.
Thank you. I love that. I'm putting it in my book. Be available however Krishna wants to use me. You know, like in the material world, it's the worst feeling. It's the lowest thing to be used by somebody. But in spiritual life, that's the greatest blessing, to be used by Krishna, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. So now let's go to Hari Chakra, and then I think that will be the last question or reflection. Thank you for being so patient, dear Hari Chakra Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mata. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So anytime you give class so nice. And one day I came to DC and I was looking for you. I saw this Mataji. I offered my obeisance and I started talking. Oh, Mata, thank you for your wonderful class. And she was just looking at my face. And then when later on I realized you are not the person, you are not the one, you are not the one. And my wife was telling me, what were you thinking? Do you think it's not Mother Rukmini?
She probably, whoever that was, she probably appreciated being appreciated. So thank you for appreciating her.
So thank you very much for always.
About this, hold on. This means that men we don't observe very closely.
No, Hari Chakra Prabhu was so busy listening. He didn't look at my face. So yeah, thank you, Hari Chakra Prabhu. You have a question also, or just an appreciation?
Yeah. I have a reflection on this about the question about calling people karmis and all that.
Yeah.
And how Varaha Prabhu was saying, reflecting that even in the other, what do we call it, religious groups, is also there. Yeah, like you are saying that we should learn how to be friends with people rather than trying to make them feel down. So there is a similar thing in the biblical era, where the disciples of Jesus were also looking down on people. That if you were not a Jew and you are a Gentile, they call you that you are unclean. So they will not even come close to associate with you. And the topmost disciple of Jesus, Peter, was into that he was so much into that aspect that if you are not a Jew, he will not even talk to you. He wants you, if you are a Gentile, he sees you as an outcast. And according to the Bible, God revealed to him that you cannot call people outcasts. So if you read Acts chapter 10 from verse 10, Peter was sleeping. Peter was fasting. He fasted. And when he was about to break his fast, he fell into trance. And whilst in trance, a sheet was being lowered from the heavens. And in that sheet, there was all kinds of animals in the sheet. And the voice came from up and said, Peter, arise, kill and eat. And Peter said, no, Lord, I have never eaten something uncommon and unclean. I can't do that. And the voice said, what I have cleansed, you as a human, you cannot say is unclean. So arise, kill and eat. So even with this quotation, some Christians will quote it and think to substantiate eating of meat. But it has got nothing to do with meat eating. So when Peter came out of the trance, he was wondering, what sort of dream is this? I don't understand it. Then immediately he heard people knocking at his door. And when he came out, the people said, Cornelius has sent us to call you. So come with us. So the meaning of the dream in Acts chapter 10, verse 10 was revealed in Acts chapter 10, verse 27. So in verse 27, when they went to the house of Cornelius, then Peter saw that all the Jews and the Gentiles has mixed together, and they were like interrelating, and it was so wonderful. And Peter said, "Oh God, now I have realized that God says there is no human that he has created that we can call unclean. So now I've really understood that everybody is the son of God, if the child of God. So we have to relate to them nicely." So
Thank you.
so I love the way you were talking about how we sometimes we take a stance like that. That we start calling people kami and all these things. I've used that word for a long time, but at a certain point in time, I also realized that is this not trying to make myself holier than thou, thinking that I'm better than somebody? Because somebody may be out there not calling himself a devotee, but he might even be more devoted than me. So why not see him as also a potential devotee of the Lord? So thank you very much for that thing, that thing about kami that you were expressing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this very, very important reflection. Yeah. You know, when the Christians realize this is not just a little club of insiders of Jews, then they could take it all over the world, right? So we have to see everyone as our friend, you know. Thank you so much. So I think we're out of time, but I'm so grateful to all of you for being here. Thank you to the Vaishnavis, especially for speaking up with reflections and thoughts today. Thank you for the always very reflective and introspective Vaishnavas from Africa. And it's always my honor to be with you here. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai. Thank you so much.
Africa, and all glories to all of you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. We, like always, we can't thank you enough for your wisdom, your blessings, and your love. And today is Friday, so we pray to the Lord, the Parampara Vaishnava devotees, to help guide us through the weekend and bring us together again next week. So on this note, we're going to humbly request all the devotees to kindly unmute, and we all chant the loudest Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to express our appreciation to our honorable speaker, Her Grace Mother Rukmini Devi. Jai. Hare Krishna, Hare
Krishna,
Krishna, Krishna, Hare
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Mancha all glories to Her Grace, many Devi.
Prabhupada, Haribo.
Hare Krishna, Hare
Thank you so much, Mother, for the class. Thank you.
Thank you, my